Hey everyone, DelVecchio here for another video tutorial, and in this one we're going to discuss how to customize any WordPress website through the theme files using PHP, HTML, and CSS. And the site that we're looking at right now, I have a full tutorial on how to build this, so I'm going to link that up in the description below. But what I want to do is edit this home page. I want to customize this home page and include a full width banner area right below the navigation bar. And I'm going to do that, like I said, through editing the WordPress theme files, the template files. So let's get started. Now, when you get into manually customizing your WordPress site with code, you have to understand which PHP files are being used to render each page on WordPress. So for this instance, we're going to be editing the home page. And what I recommend that you do is search WordPress template hierarchy in Google. And you'll probably come to this page on WordPress where they give you an overview of it and they describe how each PHP file or template part is going to render. And let me click into this diagram. So it's definitely confusing at first if you've never looked into the template files. It can be a little overwhelming, but what you'll realize is that there's a handful of PHP files that you're going to want to look at that are usually in 90% of the themes that you're going to download on WordPress. And for our instance, as I mentioned, I want to edit the home page. So the way that you can kind of go through this flow chart is take a look at the left-hand side and determine what type of page you're going to be loading. So we're not loading an archive page. We're not loading a singular page. We're loading the site front page. And so you can see from here that the template file that we're going to look at is frontpage.php. And if for some reason your theme doesn't have this, then you might want to look for home.php. And if it doesn't have either of them, then it's going to default to index.php, and that's just the default theme file when one of these other theme files doesn't take precedence. So let me go back into my WordPress dashboard. And I'm going to go to the Appearance Editor section where we can see the theme files of our activated theme. So on the right-hand side here, we can see our style.css, functions.php, here's our frontpage.php, and then we also have page.php, which is going to handle all the inner pages. So for creating this home banner, we're going to edit two files, and that's style.css to give it the design, and then frontpage.php to put our HTML or our PHP code if we'd like to add that. So let me click into frontpage.php, and I'm going to add the HTML code really quickly because it's only going to be a couple of lines of code here, and then we'll take a look at the site, and then you'll see how we can edit the CSS to update our design. Now, I actually didn't learn this through taking a course. I did this a lot just through curiosity, and the main tool that helped me learn this is Google Chrome Inspector. So you'll notice that I want to figure out where I need to put this HTML code within the template file. And in order to do that, what I want to do is look for this div class equals wrap tag on the live website. So if I go over to the website, I'm going to click into this navigation bar. I'm going to right click it and hit the inspect button, and we'll get this inspector window, which I got to drag into here. So now I got it at the bottom of this browser, and what you'll notice if you've never used the Chrome inspector, when you hover over the areas of HTML, it's going to highlight that on the live website. So you'll see what HTML is being used for what parts of the website. I'm looking down here in the site content area. So let me click into here, and I want to expand this a little bit, and this is what I'm looking for right here, this div class equals wrap. So I'm going to expand this, and it looks like the first div right after that is div ID equals primary class equals content area. So let me go back to the WordPress edit theme section, and you can see that second line of code is exactly what I just said. Div ID equals primary, class equals content area. And then if we go again to look at the next line, we should see main ID equals main, class equals site main. And let me expand that, and that's what you got right here. So I can tell that these are the couple of pieces of code that I want to work with. And because I want to add this full banner area right under the navigation menu and right above the content, it's looking like I want to add it right after, or I'm sorry, before this div class equals wrap. So all this code up here is generated by this get header call. So I pretty much just want to add this code right in between the get header call and the div class equals wrap. So for this full width banner, I'm going to have a background image, one headline, one sentence of paragraph text, and then a button which is going to go to our contact form or wherever we want it to go. It's just going to be a free estimate button since this is a remodeling type website. So I'm going to just type out my HTML code here. And we're going to start with the div. So I'm going to have a div here. I'm going to give it the class full banner wrapper. And then I'm going to have another child div here with the class full banner. And right within here, this is where I'm going to put my text. So I'll have a heading 1, and I'm going to include a span element here just in case I want to style this at all. And frankly, I kind of like putting these on one line. It looks like they're automatically giving you the new line there, but I like keeping one line of code or one line of text within one line of code. So for this, I'll put build your dream home. And then I'm going to actually just copy and paste this because the second line is going to be paragraph text. So instead of H1, we'll put the P tag in here. And we'll put in a little tagline. We are the #1 local contractor serving your neighborhood. And then right after that we can add our button. So we're going to use the anchor tag for that. And right now I'm just going to put in a # hashtag under the href just so we can build this out. I don't really care where it links to right at the moment. And the name of this button is just going to be free estimate. So I think this is all the HTML that we're going to need to edit this template file. And really the cool part of this is going to be the CSS, which is going to give it the design. So let's update this and go back over here and take a look if our code is updated. And there you go. So you can see right now this is just plain text, plain heading tag, and the same thing with this button. This is just text, even though we can hover over it and it gives us the pointer. But we need to do some edits to the CSS file in order to get it looking, much better than this. But as you can see in Google Chrome Inspector, if I right-click this area, you'll notice that we can see the code that we just added. We have our full banner wrapper, full banner, H1, and one thing that I want to mention here too is you can also update the CSS code over here if you'd like to test something. So say for instance you want to test something over here, I can type in a line of CSS code. So I'm just going to do something really simple like text align. We'll center it, and you can see that it shows us how that looks. And a lot of times what I'll do is I make really small edits. So I like to edit like, less than 5 lines of code at a time. I usually test it using Google Chrome Inspector, and then I'll copy and paste any of the changes that I made to either the template files or the CSS file. So let's go back into the WordPress editor, and we'll open up style.css to include the CSS updates that we need to get this looking great. So you'll notice that we have a message up here. It says that there's no need to change your CSS here. You can do CSS changes within the CSS editor in the Appearance Customize section. That I never really edited that area. I've always worked within the style.css file of a child theme, because as long as you're using a child theme, you should be safe to make edits here. If you're not, then you're likely going to want to use this built-in CSS editor. But this is why it's important to understand the hierarchy and how things work with the template files, because you may end up making changes somewhere and overwriting something. But normally what I do is if I have this child style.css file, I'll just make all my changes or add all my updates to the bottom. So right now I have this section which is all our responsive media queries, which adjusts the design based on the width of the screen used. So right above that, I'm going to add a section for the home page. And if you notice, I have this commented code which is organizing my customizations. So I have titles, header and nav area, the content area, the sidebar contact form, and then the responsive media queries. So I'm just going to add another line here for the home page. And we'll get started with our updates, and then I'll probably have to add a few responsive updates to make sure that this looks good on any size device. The first element that we want to handle is the wrapper. So we want to make sure that that's 100% width. And one thing that I know about WordPress that you can look up is that you're going to have a class for every page to tell you what that page is. So for the home page, there's a class called home. And then if you're not familiar with CSS, you can identify a class by using this dot operator. So if you see dot home, that means that there's an HTML element that has the class with the name home. So let me show you that really quickly over here. If we go up to the body, and these are all the different classes, you can see this is the home class right here. And they're just separated by spaces, so there's a couple other classes. You can identify it by the page ID, so this is page ID 17. So adding page ID 17 would essentially be the same thing as adding home in this case. And that's what I do if I'm editing a specific page. You know, I may have a certain style for a testimonials page, and what I'll do is I'll grab that class from the body, the page ID, and then use that within CSS. So we're going to have this dot home, and then we're going to do div dot full banner wrapper. And you can actually see that they're error checking this. They show that there's one error which must be fixed. So the problem here is I don't have the curly brackets. Once I do that, you'll see the error disappear. And I'm going to do a few CSS properties on this HTML element. So I'm going to do width is 100%. I'm going to do text align center, which I kind of just showed you over there. But we're going to center everything within this element. And we're going to add a margin to the bottom. So we'll do about 30 pixels. Let's try that. Once again, as I mentioned, I'm going to update this. I have a lot of other lines of code that I'm going to add, but I like the idea of making small updates and error checking, making sure that you're doing it right along the way instead of making a ton of changes at once and then having no idea what is causing an error. So you can see doing that made this fully centered, and once we get the banner image in there, you'll see that it's full width. So let's go back here to the editor, and I'll continue, and we're going to target the full banner div. So div.fullBanner. This is one level below the wrapper, and this is where we're going to set our image. So I'm going to set a minimum height to this at 400 pixels, and we're going to set our background. So we have background. We can put in the URL here. And then we're going to have to add this file because this file right now doesn't exist. So I don't know if this will throw us an error, but we won't see anything until we upload this file to our theme directory. Right now I'm going to add this to a subfolder. So there shouldn't be any folder within the theme directory called images. So I'm going to create this folder, and I'm going to upload this banner.jpg to this folder. And then we can do a little bit of fancy positioning. There's a lot of different ways that you can position, but I'm going to do this based on XY coordinates. So my X coordinate is 0. My Y coordinate is minus 120 pixels. And I'm going to use fixed positioning. And that'll basically mean that the image is going to stay still, and when we scroll, we're going to see a different part of the image. So let me go ahead and upload this image now. We'll save this. And I have FileZilla open, which this is my FTP program of choice. And I'm going to go into the WP include. I'm sorry, I just clicked the wrong button there. We don't want includes, we want WP content themes, and we're going to check out our child theme. So you can see that these are the files that are accessible from the editor, but I'm going to right click, create a directory. We're going to call it images, and over on the left hand panel here, this is my home computer, and I have two images. One of them I downloaded from the site pexels.com, which is free stock photography, and I just cropped it and added a black background to it with about half opacity, so just to darken it up a little bit to create a little more contrast between the wording and the image. So now with that uploaded, let me go back to the site and refresh it, and let's take a look and see if it appears. And there you go. So you can kind of take a look there, and then as I mentioned with the fixed background position, that is what keeps this image still as we scroll. So there's a couple things we need to clean up here. Obviously I don't want this gap in between the navigation menu and the full width banner. I don't want the wording to be I don't want the wording to be dark so that there's no contrast between the background image and the wording. And obviously I need to add a style to the button. So we're going to roll through with some of these CSS updates. Let me go back to the editor, and we'll start with the next line, which I'm going to adjust the H1 tag. So you can really just go ahead and copy these if you like, instead of typing it out, and paste it in there. And we want to target the H1 tag within the full banner div. And I'll make a few changes here. I'm going to do text transform uppercase. So this is where you can either do lowercase, uppercase, or capitalize. So you don't have to worry about making sure that it looks correct within the HTML. You can adjust that with the CSS. I'm going to increase the font size to 3EM. I'm going to add padding to the top so that it's not, the wording isn't bumping up against the top of the image. There's a little bit of space there. So we'll add 50 pixels to that. I'm going to change the color to white. So the hex code for that is hashtag FFF. And then I'm going to add a text shadow as well to this so that it's a little bit more contrast between the dark image and the white text. And I highly recommend that you check out one of the websites that I like is w3schools.com, I believe. But anytime that I don't know a CSS property, I just searched Google for that property and check it out. And I didn't know a lot of this off the top of my head to start, and even to this day I forget a lot off the top of my head. I have to continuously search Google, but I know exactly what to search and how to find it. So it's a lot easier these days. And also, there's a few things within CSS that can be a pain in the ass. And the more websites you build, you'll start to identify those like weird, random fixes that might take you like 20 minutes to figure out what is going on within Chrome Inspector. And you'll probably be cursing. I know I spent a lot of time doing that. But every time you get through it and figure out the solution, you're that much better at the end of it. So let me save this and let's take a look. So you can see how that changes our headline. It's a lot more noticeable, and you can see the text shadow as well. Makes it pop out a little bit more. So let's continue with the next line, which is going to be our paragraph. So I'll copy this and just replace the H1 with P, and we'll make this font size a tiny bit bigger, 1.1 EM. We'll add a margin bottom to this. And we're going to make this black, actually. So hashtag 000 is a black color. And you'll see what we're going to do is use that span tag to make the background white. And the reason I put the span tag in there is because the P tag actually extends the full width. It's 100% width for the P tag. But the span is only going to span the actual width of the text. So let me add this CSS to this span. I don't know what just happened there. But let me put pspan, and we'll add a few CSS properties here, including the background color. So for this, instead of using hex code, we're going to use RGBA, which that's a way that you can add background opacity. This is red, green, and blue, and the range for this is 0 to 255. So if you do all of these at 255, you're going to get a white color, and if you do all these at 0, you're going to get black. And obviously the different combinations are going to give you the variety of colors. So for this one, I want this to be white. So I'm going to do 255, 255, 255, and then the last number is our opacity. So I'm going to do 0.8, which is going to make it a little bit transparent. And then we'll add padding to this so that that background extends a little bit outside of the boundary of the text. So for this, I'll do 15 pixels top and bottom, and then 25 pixels left and right. So let me save this, and we'll view. And you can see what that looks like right here. Now we'll move on to our button. So I'll copy this code, paste it in there, and replace the P with an A. Now for this one, I'm going to give this display inline block because this is an anchor element. It actually, I think it was given the display block feature, or it's something different where it's not centered, using this text align center piece of code here. So the way that I got around that is by using this display inline block property. And that's a good example of something that might take you a while to figure out if you're a beginner and you're just going through the Chrome inspector. So I'll add padding to this as well to make sure that the button's pretty big. We'll do 25 pixels and 50 pixels for left and right. Add a margin to the bottom so this is not bumping up against the edge of the image. And I'll add 50 pixels there. I'm going to give the button a border radius of 6 pixels. I'm going to make the background a dark red color, and the hex code for this is BB0000. We're going to make the font size a little bit bigger at 1.5 EM. Going to make it bold, so font weight bold. We're going to make the color white, which is FFF hex code. And then I'm also going to add a box shadow to this, which is pretty much the same thing as the text shadow to the wording. And let me just say that with all the CSS code, another thing you might want to search is not just looking up the properties themselves, but you can actually generate CSS code. So one thing that I often do is I'll just type in, like for this, box shadow generator. And there's usually some type of website that does this for you if you don't want to do the code itself. It'll show you exactly how it looks on here. So for this, I actually want the shadow, I don't want it aligned left or right. I want to make this centered. So we're going to do 0 pixels, 0 pixels. And then we can change the blur to actually make it stand out a little bit. So I'll set this to about 25. And the spread radius, you can see if we go too low, we're not going to have any shadow. And if we, extend it really big here, we have a ridiculous shadow. So I'm going to put this at, let me see here. Let me do, I think that looks good, about 3 pixels. And then this is the code. We just need to copy and paste this. So if I go back into my editor, I'm going to paste that code right here. And like I said, I like to put this on one line. This doesn't really matter. This is completely up to you, depending on how you how you organize your CSS code and what you want it to look like. So let me update this, and we'll see how our button looks. And there you go. I mean, you could see with just a couple of lines of code how we completely transformed this full width banner from plain text to something that looks really good. And I have 2 more lines of code here that I want to add. So if we scroll down here and I hover over this button, you'll see that it changes colors a little bit. It lightens from a darker red to a lighter red. So I want to add that same feature on here. So I'm going to copy this code for the full banner anchor, And we can target the hover by doing :hover, and we just type in the background color that we want for when we were hovering over this element. So for this, I'm going to do D2 0 0 0 0. And the last thing that I want to fix here is that gap that's in between the nav menu and the full width banner. So for that, the area that we want to target is site content. So let me just quickly show you this over here in the Chrome Inspector. So let me right click and just get into this element. So this is what I'm looking at here, the site content and the ID content class site content. This is actually site content container. So as we hover over it, you can see that green bar that's showing up here. That's the padding. So that's why we have the gap, and so all we need to do is overwrite that padding to 0. So let me go into here and I'll do that. Do padding top 0, and once we update this, we should be good to go. So let me refresh it, and there you go. You can see when we hover over it, we get the color change, and I think this looks great right now. So the last thing we're going to do is roll through some of these changes for the responsiveness, probably add another maybe 5 lines of code to make sure that our adjustments look good on every device. And I can test that out using this resizer that I have here. This is just a little applet that's going to allow me to adjust the size of the device, well, without actually changing the size of my browser window. And it looks like I got one little issue right here with the text. This is dark. And actually there's probably maybe like 1 or 2 pixels where that happens, so it's not a major deal. Something you could fix. But as I'm dropping this down, I see that it looks like our picture position isn't correct because we have a cutoff. This is the bottom of the picture, and this is actually the top of the picture. That's just repeating. And it looks like this needs to be cleaned up a little bit because the second line is covering the first one. And I probably just want to adjust the sizing for the headline and maybe the button. So let me go back into the themes, and under this responsive media query section, this is where I'll add my changes. I have 3 levels, one which is the max width 960 pixels, the next one which is max width 768, and then the last one which is max width 480, which is more like a mobile phone width. So the first one we're going to add here is for the full banner background. So I'll do home div.full_banner, and you know what, instead of typing this out, what I like to do with the responsive queries that is just copy the line of CSS that I want to change. So this is the one that I'm looking to change, so I'm just going to copy this entire line here, paste it in, and then I'll just edit whatever settings that I want to edit and eliminate the rest. So I'm not going to change the height of this at all. And I'm not even going to change the banner image, but what I want to change is the background position. So this, if I just type in background, it'll allow me to update all of these various sections. So the 0, 120, this is our background position, and then the fix is actually a separate CSS property called background attachment. So those are the 2 things I want to change. I'm going to adjust this to background position center, and I'm going to do background attachment scroll. And this is what the background image is by default. So instead of having that fixed look, we're going to have the image scroll along with it, so it's going to stay in the same spot. So let me update this, and we'll take a look at that change. And let me adjust the size to make sure. Let me see if I refresh this. I may need to open up the applet again. So let me refresh it. And yeah, I need to open up this resizer applet again. And we'll drop down here. And then once we get below 960 pixels, we should see that right there. You can see our background image changes to center. And then instead of that fixed positioning, we have scroll. So it just is pretty much just a static image right now. Let's go back over here, and when the width drops below 768, I want to change the font size of the headline and the paragraph text. So let me copy the styles for this. We'll paste them in here, and I'll just add spaces in here so they're lined up. That's just for looks. That doesn't really do anything. And then on here, what I want to change is the font size from 3 to 2.5, and that's all that I'm going to edit for the headline, so I can just eliminate all these other properties. For the P text, we're going to actually make this a little bit bigger. Oddly enough, I think it looks good when it's just slightly bigger at this width. And to adjust the second line overlapping the first, we're going to change the line height. So for this, we're going to set the line height to 2.5 EM. And then on the span, I'm going to change the padding a little bit. So instead of doing 1525, we're going to do 15.0, which means that our left and our right padding is going to be 0. There's going to be no padding on the left and the right, but the top and the bottom are going to have 15 pixels. So let's update that and refresh. And I want to see if I can refresh this just by right-clicking right within this window. So let's do that. And it did not work. I thought there was a way to refresh within this resizer, but doesn't look like it's working that well for me. So let me drop down here, and once we go below 768, we have the changes, but what I really want to do is drop this text to a second line. So there you go. You can see this is a little bit more organized here with the second line not overlapping the first as much, just a slight overlap with this background padding. And then if we drop down even further, I'm just going to make this text a little bit smaller. So let me go back here, and I'm just going to update the button text because it looks like the other text is fine right here. I'm okay with the headline text and the paragraph text. And frankly, this probably is good. I don't even think I have to do this, but I'm just going to do it anyway. On the last line here, for the max width 480 pixels, I want to change the button font size to something a little bit smaller. So let me copy that right over here. And I don't feel like copying every one of these elements, so let me just paste that in empty, and I'll just type in font size. We'll do 1.4 EM. So once again, as we refresh, bring in our resizer here, we can take a look at the iPhone sized website. And there you go. So that's all I got for today with customizing. You know, you can take this concept and apply it to any of the template files. You know, as long as you are comfortable with HTML, PHP, and CSS, you can really do a lot of customizations. And I didn't even get into PHP in here. You can use that to grab content from the WordPress database. There's a ton of functions that are built into WordPress that you can use. And maybe I'll do a future video getting into some of those. But hopefully this gave you a good understanding of how the template hierarchy works and how you can manually go in and edit these files when you're comfortable with code to get the exact layout that you want. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. And if you are a web developer that's interested in building websites for clients, I highly recommend that you go to my website where you can download a giveaway called the 15 Tools to Start Your Web Design Business. You know, as you may have noticed, this is a remodeling website, and I work for a handful of local contractors in my area. They pay me monthly to manage their website and online marketing, and if you'd like to do the same thing, WordPress is the perfect vehicle to do it. You know, if you're looking to do this as a home-based business, you have to worry more about client communication and doing things quickly versus perfecting every last line of code. And that was a hard thing for me to understand, but there are so many bad local websites out there that if you have this skill, I really think you should take the plunge and try and land a couple of paid clients, and you never know where it's going to take you. I really want to thank you for taking the time to watch this, and I hope to see you on the next tutorial. Have a great day, everyone.